Okay, everybody, I think we're going to get started. Thank you all for being here today. We are going to hear the final presentation by our intern, Abhishek Jagdale, on the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the city of Michigan City. Abhishek is a long way from home. He comes to us from Mumbai, India. He's worked with us for the last 10 weeks. He's got a master's in chemistry, and he's working on his master's in environmental science and public affairs. He's a bright young man, and we've enjoyed him being here to his second home, Michigan City, for the last 10 weeks. I was joking with him earlier. Today he's the man in black, but it's really a compliment because Johnny Cash is my favorite music artist. But a little background about this project. The city of Michigan City sits on the largest network of fresh water in the world, the Great Lakes, and it's made up of many people who value clean air and clean water. Good government engages its employees and citizens to discuss and propose solutions to problems. As such, Mayor Ron Meir and the Michigan City leadership saw an opportunity to partner with Indiana University to improve the quality of life of our city. This partnership seeks to do three things. First, we measure our greenhouse gas emissions and establish a baseline. And that's important. When Abhishek got here, we had discussions about you can't manage something you had not measured. So this will give us a starting point. Secondly, we propose practical action steps that the Michigan City employees, leadership, and citizens can take in their everyday life to achieve cleaner air quality. Thirdly, we engage with the great learning institution of Indiana University. We want to form a relationship with them over time so we can achieve win-win solutions for their students and faculty and for our city and our citizens and quality of life. And there's been a lot of people who participated in this effort. We thank everybody who helped out with data provided to Abhishek throughout this project. We thank the Sustainability Commission, the City Council members who have tracked this project, and we really feel like the Sustainability Commission is perfectly timed to really take some of the action steps into reality. So with that, Abhishek has worked hard on really making recommendations that are practical and that will result in action steps to move us forward. At the end of the day, he's going to move on in his career, and we wish him well. But our cities, our citizens, our employees, we're here. This is our city, and this is our responsibility to make sure these actions move forward. So with that, I want to introduce Abhishek, who will lead us through his presentation today, and there will be some time for questions and answers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, for introducing me, and I would like to start by thanking Rich and Mayor Meir, the Sustainability Commission, for agreeing to partner with the IU to do this thing so that I can come here and do the entire project. The experience in Michigan City has been really great. I have made numerous professional connections, met some wonderful people, and got to explore this beautiful city. Apart from that, I would like to thank the Kowalczyk family, who has, with whom I have been staying for the last 9 weeks, and literally, they have treated me like a family member, and it has been really great. And so, with that, I would like to wish you all good luck, and I hope that my results will contribute in making Michigan City more environmentally friendly community and more livable community than what it is right now. And with that, let's start our presentation. So, our agenda today would be project goals, the overview of greenhouse gas inventory procedures. Now you would see the word GHG in the presentation a lot, and that really means greenhouse gases. Community-wide inventory results, recommendations, next steps, and then we'll take some questions. So, the acknowledgement. So I would like to thank again Mayor Mead, Rich, Michael Kuss and Steve Stanford from Sanitary District, Randall Russell and Christopher Johnson, who is here from the Department of Water Works, Jessica Watt, the airport manager, Tim Frame, who is also here, the harbor master, Nicole Barker and Brianna Anderson from South Shore Line, Todd Bjornstad from Chicago South Shore and South Bend Railroad, Robin Tillman, who is the director of Michigan City Transit, Scott Weber from NERC, Stephen Holcomb from NIPSCO, then Eli Udall, who is the manager of ECLI, who has provided the software to measure these gases, and Danny Shost and Andrea Webster, who are my program managers, the ISTP program through which I came here, and again the Sustainability Commission of the city. So, the main project goal, as Richard said, that you cannot manage something if you don't measure that. So basically it is to obtain a better understanding of local sources of emissions and identify opportunities to reduce the emissions. Establish a benchmark for developing greenhouse gas reduction goals, that is to establish a baseline, and informing a data-driven sustainability plan, which should be coming up in the next few years. And then disclose the results to a reporting platform to signal the city's intent to transparently manage its environmental risks. And when we talk about reporting platforms, that includes the CDP, which is the Carbon Disclosure Project, which is a global reporting platform where cities around the world have been reporting their greenhouse gas emissions and steps they are taking to reduce them. Lastly, it is to provide a collective basis for community action across the sectors to improve life. And when we talk about improving life, reduction in greenhouse gases would effectively improve the health and well-being of people. So, moving on. Overview of greenhouse gas inventory procedures, that is, types of greenhouse gas inventories. Now, there are two types. First, the one which we are doing or which we have done is the community inventory, that is, all emissions released inside the jurisdictional boundary of the city. That includes residential, commercial, industrial, transportation, waste, and upstream emissions, etc. The other one is government operations inventory. Now, that involves only the emissions from municipal operations only, that is, the city hall, the waste management, the water and energy, but that does not take into account the residential. So that is basically a subset of the community inventory, but we have not calculated it separately because this is the first time we are doing it. So we need to get a bigger picture of how the things look. Next, so this is the US community protocol which I have been following through for the last 9 weeks to carry out this inventory procedure. So the goal of this protocol is to inspire and guide the local governments to account for and report the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the communities that they represent. Purpose of the protocol is to provide a consistent and comparable and relevant quantification of the gases and provide reporting guidance. The objective would be to measure the gases, take policies, draft policies and take actions, and then compare your results with similar communities around the US. Scopes. So the US community protocol scopes are the basis on which the sources and activities are separated. So scope 1 is basically all the emissions which are happening within the city boundaries. That is the in-boundary agriculture, stationary fuel use, in-boundary waste and wastewater, industrial processes, and in-boundary transportation. Scope 2 is grid supplied energy. Now the reason for that being in scope 2 is because not every city has a power plant like us. There are transmission lines coming in the city from somewhere else, or there might be some lines going out of the city. And that's the reason that it sits between the two of them. Scope 3 is essentially all the emissions which are out of the boundary and out of the jurisdiction of our city. So for us, waste comes in scope 3 because our waste is sent to a landfill up in Michigan. That's why it is in scope 3 and the rest of it is scope 1 and 2. Global warming potential. So this is something, so this gives us a unit which we can use. That's a standardized unit used all across the world. Global warming potential allows reporting of multiple greenhouse gases using a common unit, that is carbon dioxide equivalent. Now the reason we use CO2 is because it's contribute to 82% of total greenhouse gas emissions in US and all across the world. If we have to look at the rest of the gases, methane contributes for 10%, nitrous oxide accounts for 6%, and fluorinated gases account for 3%. Now in US, on average, 29% of the emissions are due to the transportation, 28 due to electricity generation, 22 due to industry, and then 9 for agriculture, commercial, and residential. Now, that being said, that does not necessarily mean that our community has to follow the same thing. Every community has a different demographic and different socio-economic backgrounds and scenarios, so that may differ from city to city. For an example, so CO2 has a global warming potential of 1, whereas methane has a global warming potential of 28. So you can see that 1 ton of methane, which if emitted in the atmosphere, that is equivalent to 28 tons of CO2. And that is also equivalent to 28 tons of heat captured due to CO2. For nitrous oxide, it has a global warming potential of 265. So 1 ton of nitrous oxide emitted corresponds to 265 tons of CO2. And this will help us understand how much CO2 we are emitting, and because even when we emit methane and nitrous oxide and other gases, the results are in terms of CO2. So it helps us. So with that, we'll get into the community-wide inventory results for calendar year of 2017. Now the reason we chose 2017 was that sometimes it may happen that the utilities do not have the data for current year or maybe a year before that, and then we have to use factor sets or E-grid data sets, which are calculated every 5 years or every 2 years. So you have to take into account the year from which they are and then choose the closest year to match them properly. For residential energy, now all of the data for energy is provided by NIPSCO. So for residential energy, the emissions due to grid electricity are 97,000 metric tons of CO2. For residential energy emissions due to stationary fuel combustion, that is natural gas, the emission stands at 63,000 metric tons. Now, as we go further, I will get into some statistics about it. But before that, let's look at the commercial and industrial. So, commercial energy, the emissions due to electricity stand at 165,000 metric tons of CO2, and emissions due to stationary fuel combustion stand at 48,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. For industrial, emissions based on large facilities within the city, which may or may not report to EPA depending on how much they emit, because EPA has certain standards. So if you do not emit do not emit above a certain limit, then you don't have to report it. So for industrial, the emissions due to electricity stand at 78,000, and the ones due to natural gas stand at 53,000. Now you will see a trend in all three of them that emissions due to grid electricity are more than natural gas. So that is seen across the US and in many parts of the world. So we are not doing bad in terms of trend. So energy use statistics. So energy use across 3 sectors accounted for 75% of total CO2 emissions. And when we have to look at the 3 of them, so it is residential, which is 32%, and then commercial is 42%, and then industrial is 26%. Solid waste. So the first is the emissions due to transporting the entire waste from Michigan City to the Southeast Wayland County landfill up in Michigan. So the emissions due to that stand at 160 metric tons of CO2, and for the waste generation, they stand at 5,000 metric tons of CO2. Now, the total waste generated within the city, including the garbage and debris, was 13,641 tons. Only 7 to 10% of that was recycled, and that is the Indiana average. The US average stands at in between 30 to 34%. So there is a huge potential to reduce that amount. Waste and wastewater. The first is emissions from flaring gas of digester. So flaring of digester gas, that stands at 14 metric tons. Emissions from the combustion of digester gas stands at 1 metric ton. So you see, given the scale of this chart, I was not able to fit it there, and that's why it is not visible. Emissions due to wastewater treatment stand at 313 metric tons. Processed nitrous oxide emissions due to effluent discharge stand at 176 metric ton, and supply of potable water. Now the reason that being so high is they have to use what it's called booster stations to bring out the water from the lake and then supply it and distribute it around the city. But nothing to worry about that, that's fairly common and that's not something which is above the limits. Fugitive emissions. Now this is a low-hanging fruit for the city. Fugitive emissions basically mean that gases or vapors which are given out in the air due to leaks in the equipment. And so basically that is natural gas which is wasted and not utilized. So for commercial sector, those stand at 1380, for industrial it is 1540, and residential it is 1846 metric tons. Now the usual trend in US is residential should be the lowest and industrial should be highest. But in Michigan City, residential is the highest. So that might mean, I'm not saying that it does mean that, but that might mean that there are leaks within residential equipment which should be looked at. Upstream impact activities. Now basically upstream impact is again the same thing but in terms of electricity. So that is electric power transmission and distribution losses. That is for commercial it is 7400, for industrial it is 3500, and for residential it is 4350. And now there are no usual trends around US which are seen. So I mean there are no conclusions which we can take from that. But still, I mean, taking good care of your equipment and using energy efficient equipment should reduce this as well. Consumption based emissions. Now I'm not saying we should all go vegan, but if we have to go vegan, then this is a very compelling reason to do that. Because meat consumption is the highest, and that's not just for Michigan City, that is for the entire world. So meat consumption accounts for 33,000 metric tons, that is just for Michigan City. Oh, I'm sorry. And the rest of them are fairly modest, and all of them are below 10,000. So that's interesting. Transportation. Now you have seen a theme where all of them are in blue, but I could not help. I had to put this in red. Just the emissions from passenger vehicles in Michigan City stand at 63,000 metric tons of CO2. And that is more than 70% of the emissions due to transportation. And that includes your airport, your boats at the harbor, and your transit systems, the South Shore line, the freight line. You can see all of them over there. And basically the aim of the city should be how we can divert people from using their cars, and can we give them some alternative ways of transportation. So this is the final CO2 by category and how it looks. Now this is different from what it was at the Sustainability Commission meeting, because that was the preliminary result. So after that I had to do some more calculations and take out the emissions which were double counted due to data from the utilities as well as from the NIPSCO. So recommendations. Residential energy. Motivating people to buy renewable energy from the grid. And now, I mean, that is, so I don't really know how much NIPSCO produces, but I know for sure that they use renewable energy credits to provide you with renewable energy from the grid. Solar panels for houses and communities. Use of platforms such as Solarize India. So what basically they do is they would help you get a quote from the manufacturer directly. And so it basically eliminates the middleman and it helps you a lot in terms of economic benefits. Buying energy efficient equipment, as I said, to reduce the upstream impacts, this is necessary. Energy audits of residential properties. Use of NIPSCO's no-cost home energy assessment. So basically this assessment is free of cost. It takes around about 1 to 2 hours, and that energy advisor would analyze your entire property, would help you in getting LED bulbs and duct sealing, energy efficient sink faucet aerators, energy efficient shower heads, water heater pipe wraps, and furnace filter whistle, all of which, if employed, should reduce your consumption and your monthly bills by around about 50% over long term. So that is really something at which everyone should look at. And then repairing any leaks in your houses. That is essential for reducing fugitive emissions. Commercial and industrial energy. Development of buildings under the high efficiency and sustainability and low emission standards. Now that is of paramount importance. Use of Energy Star and LEED or LEED E-bomb standards or certifications. Now I would personally like to push for the city buildings to start using the Energy Star portfolio manager, because that gives you a way of tracking your consumption, tracking how much gas you are using and electricity, how much waste you are producing, get to know how much greenhouse gases you might be emitting, and then help you reach your targets more efficiently. Now, I know for sure then modernization of sector through application of electrically efficient processes. Now, at sanitary district, what was the thing that you employed? I guess, is it the
LED lighting and turbo blowers?
Yes, that is a very effective and efficient way of reducing electricity consumption. And then changing street lights to LEDs. Now I'm aware of the citywide energy savings program or the plan, which is changing conventional lights to LEDs at places like Municipal Airport, Golf Course, Patriot Park, Ball Field, and a few more. But if that done across the city, should result in fairly efficient city. Solid waste. Development of an integrated waste management plan, which includes education and awareness. So only, as I said, only 7 to 10% of the waste is being recycled. So creating an awareness plan. So from what I think, there is potential to increase that at least till 20 to 25%, which should be huge. And so I'm aware that Daisy Lee, who sits on the Sustainability Commission, she heads the cafeteria recycling program at Kruger Middle School, where she reduced the amount of garbage which comes out of the cafeteria from 10 bags to 2 bags. And most of that waste, if it is an unopened item, it goes to homeless shelters around the city. That is more than 80% of waste being diverted from going to landfills. That should result in significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Another one is installation of separate garbage bins at all public places, along with clear instructions of what kind of waste goes in which bin. Now, I have seen people throw in the trash. I mean, that's just cross-contamination. Even if it's not recyclable, they think it can be recycled and they throw it in. If it's recyclable and they don't know about it, they throw it into landfill. And that's essentially rendering both of the wastes pretty much useless. So a lot of education and awareness has to go in that. Reverse vending. Now this is being done, I mean, I'm not sure if this is being done in Michigan City, but I've seen it being done in Michigan. So basically installing a vending machine on a trial basis at let's say Washington Park, which would pay you for recycling your plastic bottles and cans. And I mean, making money is a good motivation to make people go that extra mile and recycle your plastic bottles and cans. Because I've heard many people saying that there are a lot of plastic caps and bottles on the beach during the beach cleanup. And so this can be a very effective way of tackling that problem. And city can ask for funding to entities like Walmart and Myers and Al's to showcase their stewardship, environmental stewardship, and that can be a very successful product. Encouraging and incentivizing local businesses to move towards more environmental friendly ways of packaging. That is, stop the use of styrofoam takeout containers and start using something which is degradable or compostable. Transportation. Now, I would like to call it sustainable mobility instead of transportation. So, developing a transit system based on efficient and renewable public mobility schemes. That is, modernization of fleet vehicles through grant money. Now, there was a grant of Volkswagen which helps you change your engines in your transit vehicles. So, that is one way of doing that. Then, lease option for immediate benefits with no upfront costs. Right sizing the fleet to meet the demand. Now, when I say right sizing, That does not necessarily mean just start buying new buses. You can increase the frequency of buses during the peak hours, or increase the hours of operation, or reroute the entire system to accommodate more people so that they can make use of this transit system. Because from what I have seen, there are not very many people in the city who use the buses. I mean, most of the time they are running empty, and that's pretty much putting the transit department in loss. Using electronic vehicles and hybrids for the fleet vehicles now, I'm not really sure which department has it, but some of the departments in the city use CNG vehicles, I guess sanitary district, yes. And some of them use electronic and hybrid vehicles, but that number can be increased. Developing electronic charging infrastructure in the city. Now, the thing which I've heard many people saying is we should encourage people to buy more electric cars. But if you don't have the charging infrastructure, it's of little use. And then bike sharing. So I am a fan of this thing because bike sharing is the most environmentally friendly and economically frugal way of transportation. And we all know that there is a bike train coming in from Mount Baldy up until City Hall and then going that way.
Up to Michigan.
Up to Michigan. And so if we have bike sharing going on that biking train, then that's a good way of reducing emissions. I mean, that's a tourism thing as well. I mean, you can use that thing to boost tourism. Other recommendations: consider potential sources of carbon sinks within the city, that is, plan reforestation and increasing the tree canopy. Well, this is something really common. Pass the resolutions to institutionalize sustainability. Well, the formation of Sustainability Commission is a step in that direction. Formal commitment to climate action, that is, signing the US Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement or Global Covenant of Mayors, which essentially, so Global Covenant of Mayors and CDP, which is the Carbon Disclosure Project, they go hand in hand. So that is basically you are taking steps to account for your emissions. Leadership should ensure that sustainability is prioritized in government operations and community-wide. And then business engagement and recognition programs. So there should be some programs where you recognize the businesses who are making a sustainable effort or making an effort to reduce their impact on environment. Next steps would be these. So these results are cogent but imperfect due to incomplete data in few centers, as I said. So the landfill in Michigan, they declined to give us much data which I required. So most of the data was given to me by Steve from Sanitary District, but I required some more data and they declined because they said that we are out of jurisdiction, so I did not get it. And the NIPSCO power plant, they do not publicly give out the information about the electricity being used by the plant itself. So that is not there, and then there is no way of tracking refrigerant leakage around the city. I mean, nobody can go from house to house tracking the amount of refrigerant which leaks from that house. I'm really sorry. The inventory can be used as a baseline for the city to devise an effective climate actions plan. Excuse me. So focus on the emissions that the city can exert influence on, that is the low-hanging fruit, such as energy efficiency, waste minimization, transportation, and solid waste. That is the thing. And so with that, we can get to questions. Yes, go ahead.
How do you calculate the fugitive losses for a residence, for example?
Yeah, so there is a emissions factor, which is fugitive emissions factor, which is 0.4 to 1, depending on in which subregion are you. And so based on the consumption of electricity and based on that emission factor, you get a good estimate of the amount of fugitive emissions.
You mentioned leaking equipment. It seemed like you were referring to natural gas.
Yes.
It's hard to imagine massive natural gas leaks.
That's not the amount of natural gas leak. That's the amount of CO2 equivalent. That does not necessarily mean that you're saying about this, right? You're talking about this?
Right, the fugitive gas,
Okay.
natural gas distribution.
So that is not the amount of natural gas which is leaking. That is, so natural gas is basically
Methane.
methane, yeah. So I told you about, so 1 ton of
28
methane is
to
28 tons of CO2. So divide it by 28 and you will get the amount of natural gas, which might be being lost to the environment. So that across all the city, it gives you a fair measure of,
Okay, so that loss is just calculated from an EPA emissions factor?
yes.
Okay.
Because there is no way of, as I said, tracking those emissions very effectively, and that's how it is being done all over the country. I mean, if all the industrial facilities had the data on hand of how much they have lost, and you can add that data, and then that would give you a perfect measurement, but if they don't have it, then that's the only way to go about it. Do I satisfy you? I mean, do I satisfy your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Where are we in comparison to a city or town of best practices?
Okay, so in terms of waste management, I would say we are lagging behind. Because, I mean, the entire state of Indiana is lagging behind because that's 7 to 10%. US average is 30 to 35%. So that is one thing. And so Gary recycled 11% of their waste in the year 2017. So, I mean, if you look at towns in California, they are way ahead of everyone. So, but
So we've talked, we've had a lot of discussions about recycling and the opportunities because this is kind of in the realm of what you can do in your own circle of this existence. So it starts really at home, getting people to understand why they would put something not in the landfill but in a recycling container. But it's really more than that because we have to educate people on how to recycle. So what are the thresholds with something that needs to be rinsed out, or what are the actual materials that are recyclable? Because I know that we have major cross-contamination issues where people think, oh, I want to recycle, they might err on the side that it's recyclable, or not clean a container, or, simple examples of education. I think that we have a long way to go on to bump that number up, and that's something that I think we can do right now. So I especially like the recommendation about bike sharing as well, that Abhishek, he was kind of passionate about that, especially with the implementation of our bike trails. This is something the city has looked at, and again, it seems like a no-brainer. We just want to do the research and make sure that we kind of get the best product out there, and in terms of not only the environmental benefits but the health benefits that are associated with that. But a lot of what I said at the beginning was we really encourage Abhishek, and I think he did a great job of providing very practical recommendations. A lot of it is common sense, but that we can kind of take the hand off and begin to educate and implement.
and there might be a few recommendations which I might have left out or I might not have thought about. And if anyone has any idea about it, then please feel free to come to us, come to Rich, and come to the Sustainability Commission and let them know about it. Yes, Nancy.
It's really too bad that the Michigan landfill wouldn't share with us the data, because that would be extremely helpful to have regarding especially recyclable items that are showing up
We
there.
pressed them too.
Also, thank you for the shout out regarding Daisy Lee's project at Krieger Middle School. And I know she's committed to moving that project school-wide. So maybe the Sustainability Commission could help her in emphasizing the importance of that to other schools. I know it's hard to get them on board because it's one more thing for them to have to do during the lunch period.
And
She's working with us in the
Yes.
high school this year.
Oh, great.
Come
Oh,
to work with us
fantastic.
in the high
Oh,
school.
that's great, because if you get the whole high school, that's going to be
We barely
extremely
started at the
helpful.
end of last year because she helped us get some new
Great.
containers through Pepsi, but
Great.
And that's the impact.
Yeah,
10 bags to 2 bags, that's how.
that's a lot, yeah. The other thing are the grocery stores and the supermarkets in Michigan City. I know a lot of vegetables that are still edible just go into the trash. And it seems like there should be some way to be able to get that from the grocery stores, supermarkets to the food pantries, because in many cases the food is still edible, it's still good. It just doesn't look pretty anymore, and that's why things are being tossed.
That's a very,
Didn't you cite a precedent on that? Another city was doing that. They were gathering food that had been expired.
yeah,
You talked to me about that.
I guess that was Bloomington.
Oh, that was
Bloomington?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you, first, the Michigan reverse vending, that would be a good implementation here in Michigan City. I do know a lot of people from Michigan City who do travel over to Michigan, but the problem that I know that's in Michigan is it's capped. So you can only take a limited amount, and what happens to that, recyclable stuff once it's like you're done with your cap. So like you can only get up to $10. It's 10 cents or whatever it is per bottle or can or whatever, but you can only get up to $10 or whatever is at the capped store. Usually it's at a gas station or whatever store. So I do know that it is capped, but I don't think it should be capped because a lot of people will come with by the boatloads trash bags full of stuff. So I don't know what happens to that waste once it's capped off. I don't know if they're throwing that back into the garbage. So that's just one of a recommendation. If you do bring it, please don't cap it because it's an incentive program that people will really love the incentives. But my other thing is, could you speak more on the mayor's, I think it was a campaign for sustainability or whatever it was called, the plan for, yeah. Can you speak more on that mayor's climate protection agreement and what that is?
So that is basically you sign an agreement, whereas you have to disclose all your emissions and the steps that you are taking to reduce them. And then it's not like they will put a target on you. You have to basically decide what targets you want to achieve. But it gives you a sense of accountability that I have to report to someone or some platform, and that makes people do the work. And that's just an agreement. It's nothing more than that.
But what about maybe a clean air ordinance to help with certain things, like you were talking about the residential energy issues, and we were talking about the waste issues. So would a clean air ordinance assist with alleviate some of that information?
Yes, well, that would be if that ordinance has mention of how we can do it, or how solid waste would help them get clean air. I mean, if it's just about the emissions in the city,
Right.
then that's a very generalized term.
Right.
But emissions in terms of reduction of solid waste, then that gives it a very specific direction of how you want the people of city to move in.
Right.
Then that might be helpful. Yes, Steve.
This is a wonderful contribution, a wonderful first step. It seems to me the next step is some group has to be empowered to develop a climate action plan,
Yes.
and then with the city council to adopt goals, and including when we're going to get to net zero. And within the context of that plan, we'll be able to figure out what the 4 or 5 critical things have to happen. With a list of lots of recommendations, it's very hard to know which ones are critical and which ones are just nice. And so within the context of doing that plan, we can focus on the programs or incentives that can have the biggest bang for the buck so that we actually achieve the greenhouse gas reduction goals that are in the plan. So I presume that that's that the Sustainability Commission is going to take that up. I don't know that.
So, are you done? Or
Yeah.
so the program that I am a part of, the Indiana Sustainability Development Program at IU. So they are planning to send an intern to the cities which did greenhouse gas inventory this year. So the next year that intern would come in and help the city draft a climate actions plan. So that can be helpful in the context of what you were suggesting. And then basically, yes, so the council and the commission all have to approve it, and there has to be a short-term goal and a long-term goal. So long-term, as we said, being carbon neutral. So, but short-term would be reduction of waste in, let's say, 5 years or something. And so that's pretty much good. Rich, you want to add something?
I would just add that the structure that you're referring to exists right now. The city council formed the Sustainability Commission. They have a liaison to the commission. The commission's active, and the mayor's behind the initiative. So I think that it's perfect timing to take the ball and run and get a strategy. And this is kind of the beginning of a journey. So the good news is that the relationship with Indiana Bloomington continues, and that's one of our goals, is to bring kind of these young people up and get their ideas and help them help ourselves.
Yes.
Has the city, or are they currently assessing the potential for brownfield to brightfield sites, or in terms of solar sites? Because I know there was the EPA grant last year to the city. So is that part of that? And is it part of the recommendation you would be making in terms of also realizing that with the NIPSCO site going off by 2028, we're going to have a massive blow to our assessed value, right? So that's the potential, right, to be able to offset that for job creation. The county is already looking at trying to make a recommendation for a solar farm on the Kingsbury Industrial Park site. So, how are we really maximizing that potential for brownfield and brightfield sites? I'm just wondering the status of that, if that's being explored.
Rich, you want to take that?
Well, I know that we are assessing, so we're inventorying the brownfields. Again, I think in the vein of you can't manage it until you measure it, so that's the first step. We probably have to, after that, once we've completed that step, pursue other grant options for. But that's the extent that what I know about it. I'm sure we can get a more extensive answer from Michael Cuss or the mayor.
Yes, yeah.
So in regards to your question that you just asked, Governor Holcomb has just put together his 21st Century Energy Committee, correct?
Right.
So within that, they're going to be studying energy policy throughout the state in the next year and a half, putting recommendations together for the state. So I think, part of what their recommendations will go down to the various cities and take a look at it. And I know NIPSCO cannot do anything until they have the recommendations of how the state is going to move together for energy as a whole.
What is the timeline on the development of the brownfield inventory?
I'm sorry.
We can get that answer for you. I don't know that answer right now, but
I believe the inventory is pretty well, there's a working inventory that's being used. Doesn't mean it's 100%, but it's probably very close to being complete.
Where do you access that?
Michael Cuss, he keeps that.
Yes. That,
The City Council is considering on first reading purchasing ornamental or decorative trash cans, and it became immediately controversial and a high-profile issue. This might be an opportunity to introduce recycling use that as a springboard, in the public discourse. And if it does pass with recycling containers, that would be educational throughout the city. But
and there are a lot of grants which pay you money to get different trash cans. So it does not necessarily mean that city has to put money in that, or can get money from many different sources. Yes.
I think it'd be really helpful if you could identify 3 communities, either in Indiana or nearby, that are doing an exemplary job of reducing emissions. Because I think partly we need to be inspired by people who are doing it and bring them in to talk to us. And and there is good work being done around the Midwest. If you could really identify a few for us, then it'd be great for us to bring those people in to talk to us. But what did they do? How hard was it? How successful were they? You know, if they were to do it again, would they do these initiatives, whatever? I mean,
So the part of my, as a part of my program, there were 13 more interns in 13 different cities across Indiana doing the same thing that I did for Michigan City. And so, yeah, what you are suggesting should be, it is a great thing, but at the same time, we should know that we cannot compare ourselves with any other city. No city would have the same amount of, same scenarios as we have in Michigan City.
I disagree with you. I mean, I've been through this in other cities, and, every city's somewhat different, but some cities have had climate action goals for 10 or 15 years. Others are still making this. We want to hear from people who've been doing it for a while, and what have they learned? And these cities are out there.
Yes, Jake.
Abhishek, that's to the gentleman's point, that's a good point, your interns. So the question is, are you guys all going to get back together, the 13 cities, and do like best practices?
Yes.
And then publish that with the different cities? That could be a starting point of where, you're being inspired by some of the programs, maybe a trash program, or maybe something that a certain city is doing very well. That could be part of the best practices, that you guys all put together and put out to the various different cities.
In addition, I think that's a great idea. In addition, I would challenge the Sustainability Commission or the members of the City Council or the policymakers to travel to outside of Michigan City and meet with people that are employing these best practices, see how they're getting it done. That's something that always pays off, is leaving the city and seeing how it's done elsewhere, bringing those up good ideas back. So to your point, I think that's a good area of focus.
When it comes to the residential, how can we clean up that portion? Since we talked about not being able to actually get into the residential places to kind of figure out if there's any leaking equipment or whatever, how can we, even begin to deal with that issue if we can't get into these residential areas?
So that is, I cannot get into houses and measure it.
Right.
But, I talked about the no-cost energy audit from NIPSCO.
But if you're auditing them, it's just giving them a review. And a lot of times when you're dealing with, which we already had that meeting, but a lot of these older homes or they have older people in there, they can't necessarily implement whatever you find from the audit. So there's still stuff they may know now, but how can we help them, alleviate some of that leakage or whatever they have in the equipment, so to better keep the house in a sustainable way and not have their NIPSCO bill impacted or whatever from this.
So the advisor from the audit can tell them about possible rebates, which are there. And then, so NIPSCO gives out the things that I mentioned, like LED bulbs and faucets and showers at a very subsidized rate. But still, that's for city to figure out how we can help fund those things for people who cannot afford it. But that's a very viable scenario, viable recommendation, but then, yes, what you said is correct.
Yes.
It should be looked at.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
North Central Community Action here in town, they go into the homes of people who could be low income and do the same assessment, and they can actually do home repairs. So that's located at the old Central School.
But even if they've been doing this for quite some time, and so if you still have this young man, reading that he's giving out these reports, and what I'm saying is not knocking their efforts, but something else has to be done on top of that, because it's obviously impacting the city as a whole, and only one organization can't do right.
And NIPSCO, at one time, they were doing fundraising where you would send people into, I run Meals on Wheels, so our clients would sign up and we would get $25 every time they did an assessment. And they'd come in with the light bulbs and the water, and that was all free. They gave it to the people. So that made an immediate impact if they used the bulbs or if they put the aerator on. So.
I think a great motivator is the stat that you shared,
Yes.
you know, that it gets,
I mean, if all of
Save
it is
you
employed, yeah,
50%.
50% of energy consumption is reduced. So that's something, that's a good motivator.
What, to put in the equipment is?
No, if you put in all the equipment, then it should save theoretically 50% of energy consumption,
Which is a huge one.
which is a huge amount, yes.
That's money.
But again, like I said, it's not knocking what you're saying, but it's not possible for all the residents
Yes,
within all the homes.
yes, you're correct,
Yeah,
but
that's
then,
all I'm saying, like, how can we make it across the board more even, because obviously what's been happening now, and NIPSCO's been giving out their weatherization, you know, equipment, it's still not effective for the city in its current stance.
How do we get more buy-in from the residents to care about this and to take things?
Well, I'm not saying that the residents don't care, I'm just saying
No,
some of the residents are not capable.
Right, and when I say buy-in, I know, but it's
Okay.
still getting them to realize the importance of it, I think.
Right.
I don't mean, I think some people just don't even stop and think
Right.
how important it is.
They just don't know. They have no idea. I mean, I
It's just the way it is.
I don't know half the stuff he was talking about with doing an audit of my house. I'm sure we're leaky as can be. But it never occurred to me I didn't know that somebody would come in and do an audit in your house and say, here's what you can do.
But we did an audit, and I don't remember them talking anything about the leaking
leaking,
anything.
yeah.
I remember getting the light bulbs and
Yeah, that's
the shower heads. I don't recall
And they
it.
just drop it off and
That's
then.
very true.
That's all I remember,
And
yeah.
then-
So, but I think that's the issue, you know, you put that, and I think part of it, and maybe I didn't quite understand it, but that because our usage is so much higher, that more of the assumption was it's coming from leakage.
Yes.
Not that it's been proven, but it's such a high
as I said,
usage.
it's really hard to measure those things.
Right.
So it's just we have a factor and then we have a total usage or total consumption. And
So-
that's how I got those numbers. Then it is possible that it is very less than that, or it might be
Because we can't
bigger than
measure
that.
it.
Yes, exactly.
So that's just partly it, like, where's it all going?
Right, right.
As I understand it, that factor is based off of regionalization, it's not based off of housing stock, socioeconomic status of
Right.
the community or anything like that. So that all could play part in how much is actually lost.
So that factor would be different in California, that would be different in New York, that would be
Right.
different in Texas.
Right.
So, you know, it's really difficult to track some of the emissions, but then that gives you a baseline to help build your actions on. That's all it is about.
I just think back to what you said about how do we get these, grants? Can we get grants to go into some of these older homes, you know? But then also, again, but how do we get the people to let people into their homes? Because I think with some people, they're just afraid and won't. Like I tried to get help for our next door neighbor with his yard from the high school. No, do it.
And then some people do not believe that there is something wrong with their house,
Right.
as you said.
Right.
And so, oh yeah, go ahead.
The big word for me is education. We've got to educate people. Recycling and leaks and whatever, education. They can't do anything about it if they don't know about it.
So who follows up on all of this stuff? With the recommendations and the report that's gonna come together and writing grants for garbage cans and, you know,
So this was a presentation. My detailed report would be handed over to Rich on Friday, and that report would be uploaded on the Michigan City website, and then Sustainability Commission can take over from there and decide on what actions to take, when to, how to devise the climate actions plan, and how to move over with it. So, yeah, I guess Sustainability Commission should be a contact point.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And if I could just add a little bit of background too, that this was actually generated by the Michigan City Sustainability Commission before we were a Sustainability Commission, by the group of 8 of us, along with Steve Perkins, who went down to the Climate Leadership Summit, 3 down in Indianapolis. So, yeah, we fully plan on picking up the ball and running with it. And you're always invited to come to our commission meetings. And we always have public comment at the end. And we're also always asking for volunteers to join up with the various committees that we've already established.
Yes.
So anybody that's interested that's here today, please let me,
Deb left. No,
Dahlia left, too bad, she's our chairperson. Dominique Edwards just joined our commission. And is there anybody else here from the commission today? Okay, I did let everybody know that this is being videotaped, so it will be available to be viewed afterwards. So you could help us out by letting your friends and neighbors and whomever else is a resident of Michigan City that may be interested in this whole process, that they can hear the full presentation and our questions afterwards today.
I did attend the last sustainability committee meeting, and they were talking about grants there. And so I know Deb will probably look into a grant when she hears this presentation. I'm sure she will. So.